Hi everybody, it's Chef Natalie with Chef Farm and Fork. Today we are going to make one thing that I grew up with that's kind of a comfort food for me. It's fried rice. And when I was little, my grandma, she was from the Philippines, used to make fried rice all of the time. And I think I was pretty much the only kid I knew who ate fried rice for breakfast. So we used a lot of leftovers that we had, maybe little bits of steak or pork or chicken from chicken adobo, which you're familiar with if you like Filipino food. And it's just kind of one of those things that's really easy. It is nice to use up some of those leftovers. You can use fresh items as well as some pantry staples. So, the most important thing to know about making fried rice is actually this. It does take a little bit of planning if you don't usually have an already cooked pot of rice around, which when you're Filipino, you typically do, so we kind of always do. And the most important thing to know about making fried rice is that the best rice to use is actually not fresh rice. It is rice that you have already cooked and has cooled down completely. And leftover rice from the night before is one of the best things to use. So I did do just that. I have this already steamed pot of rice. It was cooled overnight and it is ready to use today. What I do is I just kind of break the rice up with a fork if it's a little bit stuck together. One of the things that's really important about fried rice is that you don't want to smash the grains of rice, especially when you start adding liquid. Right now, because the rice is cold, the grains are a little more firm, but once we get them into the pan and they start to steam a little bit, they're going to become a little bit softer. And so, it's at that point where we want to treat this really delicately. So we're going to use more of folding than a stirring or a smashing motion for this rice. And then let's just go through our little mise en place list here so we have everything all ready. So that was the rice. And then I have a couple of eggs here that I've just kind of beaten a little bit. There's nothing in them. If you want to season them, though, you can season them with a little bit of soy sauce or a little bit of fish sauce. But I think we have enough flavors that are going to be happening here because today we're doing the Canadian bacon and pineapple fried rice. So that's our egg. And then the next item are peas. Everyone's familiar with peas. They're super friendly for kids. If you can't find fresh shelled peas because they're not in season, just get some frozen peas and thaw them out and drain them in advance. And if you thaw them in the refrigerator overnight, that's probably the best, just so you're not cooking them any extra before we cook them in our pan. Ooh, let's see. What do we have here? Okay. So this is one of our fresh ingredients that we are going to use today, and this is fresh garlic. This is from Gonzalez Produce at the Warrenton Farmers Market. They're also at the Manassas City Farmers Market and the Palisades Farmers Market in DC. So as you can see, I've done a little bit of prep work here so I don't bore you too much waiting for me to cut everything up. And this is what a cross section of that fresh garlic looks like. You can kind of see where the individual cloves are starting to form. And then you can see the spaces in between that are actually even starting to turn a little bit brown. And that's where you'll have spaces in between your cloves of garlic when you have a cured garlic head like this. You can see that the cured garlic head has that papery outside. And then right here is this part of the garlic when it's fresh. That's what it looks like when it's dried. So you can see in comparison, this fresh garlic is a little bit smaller in the bulb because the cloves haven't developed yet. And this cured garlic, that's mature garlic, is fully developed. It has all of the cloves in there. And sometimes when you buy it at the store, it's already ready to sprout. But this looks like a nice piece here that's a age. There's no soft spots on it. And if you can't find fresh garlic, go ahead and just substitute whole garlic, and what you can just peel it and slice the individual cloves. So we can set that aside. And the prep work I did for our fresh garlic was I trimmed this root piece here. See, this one is already trimmed. So I trimmed that off, and then I just started to cut into rounds all the way across. And we'll go ahead and cut a piece in a minute once our cutting board is clear. And that's, again, what the cross sections look like. And it's okay if they break up a little bit. Now, I wanted to save this because one of the bulbs seemed like it was a little bit further along than the others. And while on this piece, the outside is still that soft vegetal feel to it, if it grows a little bit longer, that will start to become more of this translucent, papery skin you see here. So also in the lineup, we have some Szechuan chilies here. If you don't have those, you can use our bowl chilies. They are dried. You can wipe them clean if you're worried about any residue on them. The seeds, can you hear that? The seeds are still in there. And so, you know, you can use 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 of these, depends on how spicy your family likes their food. And if they don't like it spicy at all, you can leave these out, and you can always add a spicy condiment after your rice is finished. That way you can accommodate all of the tastes that your family has. Now, I did do a little bit more prep work in advance just so that we could go a little bit faster here with our cooking. So I've roasted off some pineapple. As you can see here, it has started to turn brown, and those are the sugars caramelizing on the pineapple. And also, I have Happy Family Ranch Canadian bacon here, and I've just cut it into little pieces. And then what I do for both of these items is, and I often do it on the same sheet pan, I set my oven at 425 or 450, and I'm using a little bit higher heat because what I want to do is kind of caramelize the outside, but then also zap some of that moisture that's going to be in both of these items. So I have a sheet pan, and I put my pineapple on one half, and I put my Canadian bacon on the other half, and then I drizzle them both with a little bit of avocado oil because that can withstand a high heat, and I just toss them, keeping them separate on the pan, and then pop them in the oven for 10, 15, 20 minutes, depending on how hot you've set your oven. And I do check on them so that I can turn them so I can get a little bit of color on all the sides of both of the items. And then I have a little bit of avocado oil here for our pan. And I also have some sesame oil to finish this off a little bit. Now, we don't want to put the sesame oil in the pan as the oil that we are using to fry the items, because this is not going to be able to stand as high of a heat as avocado oil. All oils have a different smoke point, so you always want to do a little bit of research before you do your cooking and just make sure you're using the right oil for the right application. Now let's start to talk about how we can prep our fresh garlic here. Now when I bought this from Gonzalez Farm, it actually had the green stalk coming up from the top. I used that when I made a stock, knowing that I would use the bulb when I made this fried rice. So I just set this aside in my refrigerator. So what we can do is, you're gonna see the root end here, and we're just gonna trim that off a bit. And when you hold your knife, just make sure you make your claw hand so that your fingers are out of the way. And I'm using a serrated knife because this garlic is a little bit fibrous here. If you have a really sharp chef's knife, that's what you can also use. And if you notice that the outside is a little bit papery and dry, you could even just peel that outer layer off. And I'm just gonna cut kind of slowly here so you can see what I'm doing. Now I'm gonna start with the small end because that way I have the little bit bigger end to hold on to. And when you get down to that last piece, you can always kind of grab from the top on both sides so you don't risk trimming your fingertips. There you go. So I'm just gonna move this to my little prep bowl. Thank you, Town Duck, for having these cute little goodies in your store. And then I'm gonna go ahead and cut this last piece. Now I have a lot of fresh garlic here. We like a lot of garlic in our fried rice. Let's see if I wanna peel that one outer layer. Oop, I got 2 by accident. That's okay. Nothing's perfect. Oh, I just think they're so pretty on those cross sections there. All right. Great. I just like to tidy up my cutting board. When you have a clean workstation, it's a safe workstation. You don't want to be too crowded. Okay, so now what we can do is go ahead and start heating up our oil. Now, a wok is typically a thinner metal, so it heats up pretty quickly. And we have a gas stove, so I'm gonna just put this on medium right now. And I'm gonna add some of my avocado oil. And I just wanna put enough in the bottom to coat the pan. Not too much, because we don't want to end up with a greasy fried rice. We can always add as we go. That's beautiful. And you'll know it's hot when you start to see it shimmer a little bit on the top. And when this is heated, what we're going to do is add our flavoring agents to the hot oil, because really with a stir fry, what you're trying to do is flavor the oil, and that helps flavor the rest of the dish. And not to say that we have to discard what we've used to flavor the oil, because we certainly will not. We may discard the chilies, or I may keep them and crumble them over the top of the rice later. So I just like to keep a plate nearby so that I can transfer my cooked items to it. Or you can keep a sheet pan, whatever works for you, depending on how much you're working with. And then let's talk about utensils. Since my wok is non-stick, I'm going to use a wooden spoon. Or you can use a spatula. I'll get both out. You can also use chopsticks to cook. But I want to use something that is going to be easy for me to scoop out these pieces of garlic. Okay, so I feel like that's hot. It's a little bit shimmery. You can see it's flowing a little bit more freely in the pan, and that is exactly what you're looking for. So maybe even before we add our garlic, let me put these chilies in. Now that this oil's a little hot, I'm actually going to turn this temperature down. And just so I reduce the risk of splashing myself with hot oil, I'm actually going to put these chilies in this spoon. My hubby likes spicy, so we might use quite a few here. And hopefully I'm not sorry. So I put our chilies in the spoon, and then you can kind of stand back. And if you're uncomfortable, you can add them to a spot that looks dry, and then just slowly scoot them into the oil. And at this point, if you need to turn up your heat a little bit, you can. But with these dried chilies, you want to be careful because they are dried already, so you don't want to risk the chance of burning them. Since all the moisture has been extracted from them, they can burn more easily. So we'll stir that around. Now, the other thing to keep in mind is every time you add an item to the pan, the temperature drops a little. So you may have to just kind of keep an eye and make sure you still hear a little sizzle, because the idea behind a stir fry is to cook things over high heat quickly. I'm probably not going to be working as fast today as I usually would, just for demonstration purposes. So, all right. So that looks good. The chilies are starting to become toasty, and I want to take them out before they burn, because what we don't want is we don't want to have a bitter taste to our rice. And like I said, I'm going to keep those. Ooh, look at that smoke. I'm going to turn my heat down a little now. I'm going to keep those chilies because I'll probably crumble them and use them to top our rice later. Great. So at this point, I can go ahead and add my fresh garlic. If you're working with a lot of an item, you may want to add it in batches so that you don't crowd the pan and things can kind of brown nicely. So let's get cooking. Wow, that smells amazing. I love the sizzle. So you can see woo, those chili fumes got me a little bit. So you can see that the fresh garlic is breaking up a little bit. The cloves are separating from what will become the paper. And you want to keep this moving. And you want to do that so things don't start to burn. But we do want to get some color on this. So I'm actually going to break up the rounds of garlic a little bit, even though I love the way they look. They're so pretty when they're all together. Great. That's what we're looking for, just to get a little bit of color to keep everything moving. And you may notice that the garlic is starting to absorb some of the oil, but don't worry. We can always add a little bit more oil if we need to later. Again, we just don't want to have a greasy fried rice. And if you're worried about cholesterol, you can actually also stir fry with broth or stock. So that's one nice thing to be able to kind of increase the healthy factor of the meal if you're worried about your fats. Not everyone has to worry about that, but if you do. All right, I'm going to turn the heat up a little again, and then I'm going to add the rest of our garlic. Okay, and at this point, I can turn the heat up a lot more because when I go to add my peas next, that's a large volume, and they're going to bring down the temperature of the pan quite a bit. Now remember, you don't have to cook something completely before you add the next item because things are going to keep cooking as we go. So at this point, I'm going to turn my heat up as high as it can go, and I'm going to add my peas. You might hear a little crackling because there's a little bit of moisture. Oh, maybe not. Thought they might have some from being rinsed. Oh, there we go. There's that nice sound that we like to hear when everything's moving. And I'm actually just going to let that sit in the pan for a second while I grab a bit of pepper. So I am going to add a little pinch of black pepper for a little depth of flavor. And if you have whole peppercorns like we have in a grinder, just go ahead and grind some in advance so that you're not trying to grind your pepper over top of your stir fry while you're cooking. Things are likely to burn that way at this high of a heat. But I do like some color on my veggies and everything else in my fried rice, really. That looks great. And we haven't had to add any more oil yet, so that's good. And the great thing about a wok is it has these nice high sides and only the bottom comes into contact with the heat. So if you don't want to continue to cook something as much, you can kind of move it up the sides of the wall and then use the free space to cook whatever you add that's new. Speaking of, at this point in time, that might actually be our egg. And it's going to go pretty fast from here. So I'm going to add a tiny bit more. Actually, I'm going to move the wok off center a little bit, just making sure it's still stable. I'm going to add a little bit more oil so that our egg can flow nicely into the pan. And then I'm going to go ahead and add our beaten egg. And don't worry, ooh, the pea popper there. Don't worry if it gets on the peas a little bit, because it's all going to keep cooking together. And just as soon as you can, kind of start moving your egg around. You can just push the bottom layer back and forth. And I'm going to turn my heat down a bit so that the runny part of the egg moves aside when you push the bottom layer. And then once it gets to a point where it's kind of solid, you can flip it. And again, you don't want to smash your egg. My brother's wife had a good term. She said, you don't want to beat up your food. And she was right. You don't want to beat up your food. But you can start to break the egg apart a little bit at this point. And then it's cooked enough where now when you incorporate it with the peas and the garlic, it will finish cooking. That looks nice. And that was 2 eggs. I maybe could have added another egg or so, but I only had 2 left in the carton I was working with, so that's what I used. And it's all about preference. Your proportions are going to be about preference. Okay. So at this point, I think what we're going to do is add just a little bit more of our oil. And then we're going to focus on our rice. So I'm going to add our rice to the pan, and then I'm going to incorporate the peas and everything else into here. Sometimes I like to let it set for a few minutes to kind of let those bottom pieces crisp up, and then I push the already cooked items onto the top of the rice and let the rice take up a majority of the bottom of the pan. And see how I'm using kind of a folding motion? That's what we're going for here. So everything should come together nicely, and we do still have to season our rice. So let's not forget about that. Turn the heat down a little bit. And I think what I'd want to season my rice with, now you can use soy sauce or tamari, but I think I want to use today fish sauce, which is a popular thing to use in the Philippines as a flavoring agent. And so it's a fermented fish sauce. And I'm just going to do, gotta be careful because it's really salty. I'm just going to do a couple rounds in the pan. You can come back and taste it and then re-season. So we'll add that. Ooh, it smells good. And then I'm going to add a little bit more of our freshly ground black pepper. And I'm going to be generous because there's a lot of rice in this pan. And then at the same time, I'm going to add our Happy Family Ranch Canadian bacon. Here we go. Now it's starting to look a little bit more like the kind of fried rice we want to see. It's always sad when you don't get enough add-ins. But use what you've got. You know, it can even be a blend of things. If you don't have one kind of protein, say you have some chicken and beef left over, you can use both of those at the same time. Pork and chicken is always a good combination. Pork and shrimp. Smells really good. Okay, at this point we're kind of resting easy. Now, what I am not adding yet is our pineapple, because the pineapple probably still has a decent amount of moisture to it. So I'm going to leave that for the last thing and just fold it into warm at the last minute. But I'll put it here. You can gaze upon it. So I'm going to go grab myself a spoon while this kind of hangs out for a minute and just taste it so I can see what my seasonings taste like. And that way we know if we need to re-season. I'll keep a few tasting spoons nearby so I'm not double dipping, even though it's just me and my hubby. We'll just keep everything nice and sanitary here. All right, so let me see. Kind of get a little bit of everything when you do a taste test, and that way you'll have a really good idea of what needs to be added. Oop. It's good. Okay, so I think I'm going to add a little bit more black pepper. I might have taken this grind a little too far, but it's okay. Oh, do you hear that nice crackle? That means you're gonna get some yummy brown bits. And then I'm gonna add a little bit more fish sauce, but not too much. The nice thing about that Happy Family Canadian bacon is it's not too salty, so we can really kind of control the level of sodium that's going into our dish. And again, just the turning motion. Ooh, look at that. There's a nice kind of brown piece of garlic bulb. Just gonna let that hang out. Excuse me. Allergy season has really got me this year. Oh, and that's starting to look lovely. So we're getting a little bit of crisping happening at the bottom. Now, those of you who know me know I'm pretty impatient, which is why I didn't do my concentration in pastry arts. So what you want to do is just kind of turn the heat down a little bit and then let your rice sit here for a minute and let it kind of brown on the bottom if you like it that way. I do. I am going to add at this point a little bit of sesame oil. And I'm just going to do a light drizzle, a couple turns around the pan. Ooh, I told myself I wasn't going to stir it, didn't I? And then at this point, what I'll do is while that's browning on the bottom, I'll just go ahead and put the pineapple on top. You can use fresh pineapple, you can use canned pineapple. Use whatever you have access to. Things are a little bit difficult right now during this COVID response, so. Also use what you have time for. Okay, I think we can go ahead and give this a turn now. Ah, there we go. I can see some nice brown bits. That's what I'm looking for. So we're turning this over now to fold in our pineapple and to also incorporate our sesame oil, which I can now smell because it's hitting that heat on the bottom of the pan. Oh, it looks really good. I'm excited. We're gonna have fried rice for days. I better call my parents so we can share some with them. Beautiful. Okay, I'm gonna just taste and make sure that I don't need to reseason. Ooh, got a little bit of everything that time on the first go around, huh? It's hot, so I'm giving it a second. Oh, I think I got it where I want it. And so we kind of have like that funky taste from the fish salt, that umami taste, and then the browned pineapple has a nice sweet taste, and then there's the Canadian bacon, the sweet peas, the egg, and of course when you get those little hunks of that garlic bulb, oh, it's gonna be heaven. All right, oh, my doggy came up to see what's going on in the kitchen. Hi, Sasha. So now that everything is heated through and we've got some browning going on and we've got our seasoning where we want it, I would say let's go ahead and turn the heat off and it can hang out in the pan for a minute. And then we can plate. Sweet girl, go out of the kitchen, please. Good girl. Okay. So, I snipped some leek microgreens, some spicy radish microgreens. I think that's going to add a nice kick. And then I also snipped some of these pea shoots. Oh, I got a little pea seed on there. I'm just going to take that out. You can actually eat that, but I think just for looks, I'm going to remove it. And we'll borrow this bowl. And I'm just gonna go ahead and trim these at like, I don't know, an inch intervals. These are long, they're getting kind of leggy. I need to use them up, but they are so beautiful. Usually they don't even last that long, but it's been a busy week. And these are from Living Springs Microgreens, also at the Warrenton Farmers Market. Beautiful. Okay, so now we have some nice fresh greens as well. And you might notice that I'm not putting my microgreens into this hot pan of fried rice, because what we don't want to do is wilt these microgreens. We want them to have a little bit of a nice crunch and retain all of their flavor and all of their nutrients. And that's going to be best when they're fresh like this. And I just snip them right off the coconut pad. So beautiful. All right. Here we go. Looking for some pieces that I want to showcase what's inside here. So there's a little garlic. Got plenty of pineapple on there. Maybe we'll throw another little piece of ham on top there. Then when that cools for a second, again, so we don't steam our microgreens, well, it'll still be plenty hot. If you're serving family style, once the rice is cooled down a little bit in the wok, you can just sprinkle the microgreens on top, and that is going to be so pretty. I think I'll start with the pea shoots just because they're the largest. There's a couple ways we can do this. We can put them on top or we can put them around. I think I kind of want to drape them in a little line on top here. Like that. I love the tendrils. They're so cute. And then we'll do our leeks and we'll do our radishes last because they're such a pretty color. I'm gonna go a little heavy on the leeks here. If Tim from Living Springs were doing this, he'd be using tweezers because he's like one of those really fancy chefs when he works with his microgreens, placing each one perfectly. Let's see. They get kind of tricky because they stick together. I really like the way that one with the tendril looked on top, so let's keep that forward. Oop. few more radishes, and then we will be ready to walk and roll. Oh, perfect. All right. So there we have our ham and pineapple fried rice. Well, and it's really Canadian bacon, right? We have Happy Family Canadian bacon, and we have fresh garlic from Gonzalez Farm there. And then we have microgreens, a variety from Living Springs Microgreens. And you can find all of my farmer friends and rancher friends at the Warrenton Farmers Market. So I will see you at market, and happy eating.